Welcome to NARPM Radio, your source for property management practices and ideas to help your career, delivered to fit your busy schedule. NARPM Radio. Get tuned in.
We're going to jump right in here today and talk about what a landlord should do during the lingering impact of COVID-19 if their tenant tells them they've suffered a job loss, have decreased work hours, medical expenses, or other significant loss of income due to COVID-19. Well, the government has told us through the CARES Act, state government executive orders, and local ordinances that are implemented across the country that there's an eviction moratorium in most of our states and counties to protect tenants due to financial impact by the coronavirus. There have been no laws, however, established to give tenants a free pass, releasing their obligation to pay the rent, nor do current laws restrict a landlord from recovering rent at a future time. So, as property managers and landlords, what then should we do? Well, over the past few months, I've had some experience with this. If a tenant has missed the rent due date, I try to be proactive, and I've adopted the simple practice of attempting an open kimono, if you will, conversation. And I want to stress that being civil and being empathetic during these conversations are key in this process. My experience so far during these, of course, unprecedented times is that most tenants appreciate this outreach and want to do the right thing. Further, while, you have to keep tenant privacy and fair housing rights in mind, it's imperative that we, as the landlord, strive to offer solutions rather than approach them with threats or bullying. That just doesn't fly, right? There's no true one-size-fits-all solution, but assuming the missed rent payment is due to coronavirus impact, I believe there are two primary options as a landlord we can provide to the tenants. The first would be rent forbearance, and the second would be early lease termination. Rent forbearance is basically temporary rent relief to the tenants who are dealing with financial impact and hardship. As the property manager landlord, you would defer rent payments for a specific period, providing that tenant time to work out their finances and get back on their feet. Depending on your state and local ordinances, this might be a unilateral verbal request by the tenant, or as landlord, you might be able to offer back a written plan for the deferred rent to be repaid with a defined schedule. Early lease termination is just what it sounds like. It's a break lease offer to the tenant to move out early and amicably surrender the property now or in the near future, being current on rent, and give the property back to the landlord. This would include forgiveness of rent due under the lease in future months. It would also include the return of the tenant's security deposit, of course, less the cost of any damages incurred during the lease that would normally be handled during the security deposit disposition process. The question becomes, which approach is best, rent forbearance or early lease termination? Neither scenario, of course, is ideal, and there's no stock answer. But with rent forbearance, it's something that the tenant requests, and we, as a landlord, are expected to comply. But you have to ask yourself, will the tenant be able to make up the rent, and might the situation at some point result in eviction at a future date when the moratoriums are lifted? In the meantime, rent's not collected. You, as a landlord, aren't being paid your monthly rent. If you have a property management company handling your property, you're not getting your monthly distributions. And for those property management listeners out there, you're likely not receiving your management fees. So as an alternative, I've been proactively offering early lease termination. While this is not something you can force upon a tenant, when it's offered as an option in evaluating their uncertain financial situation, many of them will realize it's the best option for them to move on either to a less expensive rental unit, or perhaps they might combine households with a family member. If the tenant agrees to early termination, it puts us in a position to relist the property, find a new tenant with financial means to afford the monthly rent payments, and avoid the acrimony surrounding a possible future eviction. As landlords and property managers, we are faced with difficult decisions daily and operating our business during an age in which we must put our past beliefs aside. Previously, I would never want to do an early release for a tenant. But in this scenario, if they've been impacted by COVID-19, it's probably the most logical solution and recommendation for everybody, assuming your tenant will agree.
Do you ever find yourself walking on eggshells when it comes to conflict? You know what I mean. You rehash conversations in your head with what you wish you would have said. You wonder whether or not you should be angry. You wonder how you should address something. You want the owners to treat you with respect. You want the tenants to pay their bills and to not have an adversarial relationship with you. If you have ever walked on eggshells, you are not alone, and you're not going to want to miss the NARPM Broker Owner Conference and Expo this year. I'm the People IQ expert, Dr. Shireen McHenry, and I'm going to speak with you about how to stop walking on eggshells. There are three types of people when it comes to conflict: those who blow up, bristle up, or cut you off, those who walk around on their eggshells, try to keep the peace and make everybody happy, and those who address problems head on and create win-win solutions. You're going to want to be there, and you want to be part of that third group. I can't wait to see you.
Thanks for listening to NARPM Radio. For more details on today's subject, refer to the show notes or visit narpm.org/radio, and we'll see you next time on NARPM Radio.